In today's episode, I am sharing my top 3 tips to overcoming, unburdening, and shedding the mental load that impacts so many of us and locks us out of a mindful state. Let's get started. Hello and welcome to Live Mindfully with Laurie Moore, the podcast that invites us all to slow down and take a deep breath so that we can show up as the best, most mindful and wholehearted version of ourselves each day. I am feeling so much better this week. Thank you for asking. For those who haven't listened to last week's episode, I shared that I have had an incredibly busy 2 months. And I mean that in all aspects of my life, personally and professionally. And I am so grateful that I stepped up in my business in the way that I did, because I have learned some really valuable lessons and received some strong reminders. Now, I am a firm believer that if you are burning the candle at both ends and not meeting yourself where you need to be in the season that you are in, if you are not appropriately aligning and asking for support where you need it, then more commonly than not, an external force comes in and slows you down. And for me, that was illness. And for many of us, that is the case. And maybe it's a 2-week cold, like what I had, or maybe it's something more serious. But when we are paying attention and not dismissing illness, because there are times when I am around someone else who has a cold and I don't catch it. In fact, there have been many instances of that alone this winter. But here's what I have noticed. When I am so busy, when I am pushing myself to the very edges, and when I am so busy trying to manage so many things, the first things that fall from my juggling hands are my sleep and my diet. I start opting for more takeaway, or I am just not as present as I like to be with my cooking, and I'm choosing meals that are quicker to cook, or I start skipping meals because my stress is a little higher than normal, and I notice my sleep quality immediately decreases, and all of that happens because the mental load is too high. I've taken on too much. I've failed to delegate some of my other responsibilities effectively. And now my mind is trying to manage too much. I've reached that point where I have too much to think about and too much to plan and too many things to respond to. And this is a common ailment of modern society. We are all juggling so much that it's hard to remember which are our rubber balls, the ones that are going to keep bouncing if we drop them, and which are our glass balls, the ones that when we drop them or if we drop them, they shatter. And for me, health and sleep, they're glass balls, because when I drop them, they do not bounce on their own. They used to. When I was younger, I could get away with little sleep and a bad diet, but not anymore. Things like responding to emails, text messages, posting on Instagram, returning phone calls, for me, these are rubber. They'll keep bouncing until I get back to them. So today's episode is all about reducing the mental load. And the first tip I have is to work out, even write it down, which are your glass balls and which are your rubber ones. What are the things in your life that if they fall and shatter, it's going to be a really big problem? So for me, as an example, my top 3 would be my family, my health, my sleep. Everything else, if I am really honest, isn't that big a deal. And I would classify everything else, the study, the business, even this podcast, the friends, external family members, school, soccer, all that other stuff that I have going on I classify them as rubber balls because first and foremost, if I drop them, they'll keep bouncing. And what I mean by that is that they will continue on without my direct involvement. They'll keep moving forward in some capacity. If I miss an episode on the podcast, no big deal, really. If I miss soccer practice for my son, or an email doesn't get responded to right away, or I don't do any study this week, it doesn't really matter. These things are still important to me, but they will keep moving without my direct daily involvement. And I am not invested in them in the same way I have to be with my glass balls. Now, for someone who is the primary caregiver in their family, they may consider work as one of their glass balls. But I do want to say, unless you are a sole trader, you are probably still in the position where if you needed to take a break or a holiday or a few days off, that ball would still bounce. A coworker would pick it up, or it would still be there when you get back to it. I am talking about the things that if they fell away and shattered, your world would come apart. Because often those are the things we take for granted. For some reason, those are the things that we treat like rubber, especially when that mental load is so high. So work out, be really clear, be quite distinct. Which are your actual glass balls in this season of your life? If you have small children, they'll definitely be one of them. If you have older kids now, maybe they aren't as much anymore. If you are the sole carer of someone else, then your health and well-being is a glass ball. If you're not, and you know a couple of days of bad food and little sleep barely impacts you, but losing, say, maybe access to social media, maybe that's your connection, maybe that impacts you, then that might be your glass ball. This will be different for all of us, so we need to work out, and it'll be different in each season of life that we're in. So work that out. And if these are my glass balls right now, but work is really high at the moment, then we need to work out, okay, do I need to invest in a babysitter or extra daycare? Do I need to hire a cleaner for the next 6 months? Do I need to switch my calendar up? For example, like the next month for me is really social. It's always been this way. It's my son's birthday, then it's Father's Day, and then it's my birthday. The school holidays are coming up in 5 weeks. So taking on more work or booking in more weekend work activities in addition to the study I already have, it's not going to work for me. It's just going to stress me out. I used to catch up with a colleague of mine every week, and I've looked at my calendar and I've realized this is not something that I can continue to do. I just don't have the availability. And sure, that person might get upset with me if I say to them, hey, look, I know we've been catching up, but we can't anymore. I just don't have the availability. But that isn't my glass ball. I don't need to be worried about their business because I'm managing mine. And if I have time, great. But if I don't, then I don't. And I invite you to consider, look at this seasonally. Last week's podcast, The 4 Seasons of Life, How to Adapt and Thrive, was all about viewing this moment in your life as a season. And right now, I feel like I am in a spring season. Everything is just about to start blooming and is going to be busy with lots of activity, lots of social activity. So there are things that I just don't have time for right now, and it's not for forever. It's just for now. So have a look at your life. Get clear on the season you are in and plan accordingly. Don't get caught up in other people's business. What are your responsibilities? What are your glass balls? What needs to be cancelled or outsourced? And don't think of this in the capacity of lack. Don't think of it like, I don't have the time, I don't have the resources, I don't. Don't do that. Think of this in the capacity of abundance. What will you achieve if you get this stuff under control? And what you will achieve is a reduction in your mental load, which will open you up. It will open you up, not to take on more stuff, just to be more present and available to the things that are most important to you. Play the who can I ask to manage this game? Or what can I cancel to open up this calendar game? To create some breathable, fresh air in your calendar. What can you cancel? And finally, ditch the guilt. Because there is one thing worse than guilt in the moment, and that's regret in the future. That's, I wish I had cancelled that because it didn't turn out how I had hoped. I wish I had hired a cleaner because I just slipped on the grime in the bath and really hurt my hip. I wish I had just ordered takeaway tonight because I've burnt dinner and screamed at my partner and kids. Ditch the guilt, because misaligned guilt turns into regret. When you feel guilt about a decision you are about to make, ask yourself if you're likely to feel regret about it later, or is there even a possibility that you will regret making this decision later? And I am sure the answer will be no. Don't feel guilty about having somebody else manage something. It isn't an indication that you weren't capable. It is an indication that it is just not something you have time for right now. And you would much rather feel guilt in the moment about handing something off and going, oh, I should have done that, but I can't do that. I'm handing it over, rather than regretting. I should have given that to someone else. I don't have capacity right now. So my top 3 tips: know your glass balls from your rubber ones, delegate, outsource, or cancel as much as you can to create some breathable space in your calendar, and ditch the guilt. I found a wonderful article online called 10 Real-Life Practical Ways to Reduce the Mental Load. I've included it in the show notes, and it has some really excellent ideas. Thank you so much for listening to today's podcast. Please share this episode with family and friends and across your social media so that we can all start to reduce the mental load. I hope you have an amazing rest of the week. Until next week, take good care of yourself.